Hello and welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Veenu Sandhu. It's the 9th of January 2024 and here are the questions we will be answering today. How can India stop popping antibiotics? What is driving leopards to cities? Will IT earnings remain disappointing in Q3? And what is cyber kidnapping? Antibiotics are given to neutralize harmful bacteria and to halt their reproduction. But their overuse is fast turning into a kind of epidemic. It is turning these germs into superbugs, which are antibiotic resistant. India has one of the highest mortality rates due to this antimicrobial resistance. So how can India stop popping antibiotics? Shivam Tyagi looks into the prescription for the answers.
Remember the last time you fell ill and nonchalantly popped antibiotic pills without consulting a doctor? You know it's incorrect, but it's a common practice now. Today, the practice has led to a major public health crisis: antimicrobial resistance. Inappropriate use of antibiotics is one of the main contributors to antimicrobial resistance, or AMR. According to the World Health Organization, AMR occurs when bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites stop responding to antibiotic medicines. It has the potential to threaten the treatment of diseases such as tuberculosis, malaria, and common infections, which rely on antibiotics. Unfortunately, numerous studies over the years have identified India as a hotspot for AMR. But why? India is a tropical country, and people here suffer from more infectious diseases compared to people in other parts of the world. So, doctors here are more likely to prescribe antibiotics to treat a patient in good faith, says Dr. Rajiv Jayadevan, chairman of the research cell at Kerala State IMA.
But on day one or day two, there's no way for the doctor to determine it was a virus, even though you might have heard many of us speak on national media and so on, saying that viral infections don't need to be treated with antibiotics. Think of it from the practitioner standpoint. When the patient is in front of you, there's no way for the doctor to say that this is bacterial or not, or viral or not. So they use their clinical instinct. So the clinical picture is warranting antibiotic, the doctor will use an antibiotic. So if you multiply that across a population, you can see the use of antibiotic will be high in India. Second problem, what I see here is there are extensive over-the-counter use of antibiotics. Patients bypass the doctor. They may go to the drugstore, medical store, as they are called, medical shop, as they are called here, and talk to the person on the counter who might not even be a pharmacist.
Under the Indian Drugs and Cosmetics Act, antibiotics are required to be sold by retail pharmacists only on the prescription of a registered medical practitioner. However, the implementation of the regulation continues to be a challenge, as rampant over-the-counter sales of antibiotics persist throughout the country. Blame it on the fragmented nature of the pharma retail market in India. Unorganized markets undermine the ethical sale of drugs and regulatory checks on medicine distribution. In 2020, the pharmacy retail market was valued at 1.78 trillion rupees. It is expected to reach 3.07 trillion rupees by 2026, expanding at a CAGR of 12.02%. Of this, the organized retail pharmacy market stood at only 13,421 crore rupees in 2020, according to US-based consultant marketresearch.com. So, is there a concerning trend here?
India is going towards a catastrophe in terms of actually antimicrobial resistance. If you look at the World Health Organization kind of recommendation, it has very clearly given a direction to all the countries saying that among the aware classification of antimicrobials, that is access, watch, and reserve, about 60% of them had to be the access drugs. But what is happening in India is something, which is very, very different, phenomenally different. Instead of actually 60% usage of access drugs, we are having approximately 60% of watch drugs being very frequently used. And this abuse is going to have a serious long-term impact on how we are going to treat the patients, how we are going to see the escalation of the mortality and the morbidity, and making actually the patients vulnerable and the doctors coming into a situation where they would not have any antibiotics available for them to treat even the common infections.
Not surprisingly, WHO lists AMR among the world's top public health threats. Pharma insiders agree that weak regulatory control on sale of antibiotics could lead to antimicrobial resistance among individuals and communities. This calls for regulatory intervention to address the issue. Retail as well as online pharmacies should be made accountable for examining the veracity of prescriptions for safe dispensing of medicine. Farmers using pesticides to increase crop yields can increase resistance among plant pathogens. This eventually leads to the transmission of AMR organisms in humans from horticultural sources. The growing use of antibiotics in the animal husbandry sector also adds to this problem. Imprudent discharge of industrial waste from pharma companies and hospitals may release antimicrobials directly into surface waters. So, what more can be done to tackle the public health crisis? Dr. Tipu T.S. of Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, Kochi, proposes restrictions on the use of antibiotics in clinical and non-clinical facilities, as well as accountability among prescribers.
The antibiotic use or misuse is not only limited to the hospital facilities, but there is rampant use of antibiotics in the agriculture, in the field of fishery, for increasing the yield, as well as in animal husbandries. So, that requires a wider regulation as well as education in a wider context. It is like a slow pandemic. If we do not understand this, and if we do not come together, and if we do not act to prevent this widespread antibiotic misuse, then that will lead to antimicrobial resistance in the environment, which can in turn cause a resistant infection in a person who is getting infected in the community.
Public health is a state subject, which allows states to formulate their regulations. Presently, only Kerala, Delhi, Andhra Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh have action plans for AMR, while the rest of the 24 states are still to adopt one. Although India has a national plan to address the threat, all states must implement similar action plans.
Kerala, meanwhile, has launched a statewide operation to check the abuse of antibiotics. It will also deploy covert squads to monitor the sale of these drugs. Let us now turn our focus to another threat which is giving sleepless nights to people in various parts of the country. Incidents of leopards straying into human habitats have been on the rise for a while now. From the posh colonies of Gurugram and Noida to the villages of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, leopards are increasingly making their presence felt. But why so? Abhijit Kumar finds out.
Bijnor, a nondescript UP district, found itself in the news in November last year. Not because of its sugarcane plantations, which dot its vast plain landscape, but because of a creature that often lurks from these thick tall grasses. On November 4th, the UP's Forest Department claimed to have caged a leopard which had killed at least 17 people in the district. Its last kill was a Class 6 boy who was getting ready for school on a cold November morning when the animal struck and dragged him into the thick vegetation. Meanwhile, in neighbouring Uttarakhand, hunters have been roped in to tranquilize a man-eater leopard which has killed at least 2 women in Nainital. And about 2,500 kilometers away, in the Pandalore area of Tamil Nadu's Nilgiris district, locals blocked Kozhikode-Gudalur National Highway on 7th of January. A leopard has attacked and killed a 3-year-old girl there. Another report from Baramulla said that several villages have reported killing of their livestock by leopards. From Kashmir to Kerala, instances of leopards straying and attacking people have increased. These elusive animals are also venturing into dense societies like Noida and Gurgaon. Just last month, a leopard was spotted in the posh Delhi's Scenic Farms area. Another was found roaming in a greater Noida society. Experts believe that a combination of factors is driving leopards into cities. One of them is increasing leopard population. According to a status of leopards report published in 2020, the estimated population of the leopards had jumped to 12,852, a 63% rise from the 7,910 in 2014. And recent reports suggest that nearly 14,000 leopards now roam the country. As these big cats expand their territories, they are inadvertently finding themselves closer to urban areas. Yadavendra Dev Jhala, a carnivore expert and former dean at the Wildlife Institute of India, believes that livestock density in urban areas, as well as increased surveillance through CCTV cameras, is leading to increased sightings of the otherwise secretive animal.
We know that urban areas and peri-urban areas, they continue to expand into what is essentially sort of leopard habitat. It may not always be primary forests. These could be secondary forests and so on.
These are very versatile, adaptive cats, and they can live with semi-urban situations or even sometimes in urban areas. So this leopard population can sustain with humans. Leopards were there since a long time, but the approach to seeing these leopards has improved substantially. So now we have CCTV cameras and people are more vigilant. So you notice these animals, which were very elusive earlier, to be seen more often. Also, the leopard population in India has increased substantially. Poaching has been controlled, so it's regulated across India. There also the prey base has improved in the cities in the form of stray dogs, and the leopards stray into urbanized areas to hunt dogs.
Meanwhile, Wildlife Protection Society of India says that the number of poaching-related deaths have remained almost the same despite a significant growth in the population of these big cats. Some experts also suggest that the spotting of leopards in and around human settlements is also a result of the growing number of tigers in forests, which are extremely territorial by nature. According to the latest estimate by the Wildlife Institute of India, the tiger population in India was estimated to be at 3,682 in 2022, up from 2,967 in 2018. The average minimum territory size for a tiger is around 15 to 20 square kilometers, so the rising number of tigers may have pushed some leopard populations to the margins of forests, bringing them closer to humans. Experts also say that leopards are highly adaptive by nature and thus can easily survive in semi-urban and urban settings.
It might be true for one place, but this cannot be said generically. A forest area has a certain capacity, okay, where there is a ratio of prey to predator. Of course, leopard and tiger, right? So the tiger is the apex predator in a forest like that, right? But their feed requirements are very, very different also. So it's also dependent on the prey base. So I think that this is a very geography specific, answer in that sense, and it should be limited to certain areas, and it could be true in some areas and not true in some areas at all.
Various state governments have come up with action plans to combat this conflict. The Maharashtra government last year proposed a sterilization drive to curb the rising population of leopards in the state. Gujarat has also sought permission to sterilize the feline cats. So what is the way out?
We need to understand, how these large cats are going to react, behave, after in a particular geography after neutering and sterilization. I think there's a lot to understand before mass implementation of a sterilization program.
Conflict is increasing in areas where there has been traditionally been conflict in those areas. Now, the reason for these conflicts are manifold. One is that, you have leopards who have lost their fear of humans and consider possibly humans as their on the menu card, So these leopards need to be targeted and removed from the population. So that is one way to do that. The other thing is we have to learn to live with leopards. Most leopards, when they encounter humans, are not going to even show themselves. So it's 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 chance that the leopard is going to attack you when you encounter a leopard. We have to change our lifestyle slightly, because there has been a generation or 2 generations when people have forgotten to live with large carnivores.
Experts believe that leopard sightings are bound to increase as the population of leopards soars. Leopards are an integral component of ecosystem, and it's the humans who have to adapt to the situation. What we need is an increased awareness and precautions.
Meanwhile, on Monday, bears made their presence felt on Dalal Street. Key benchmark indices stumbled amid weakness in global indices. But IT stocks shone amid this rout. Stocks of IT majors have been in the spotlight after a sharp recovery seen last year. The excitement has been led by hopes of improvement in IT spending as global rates begin to decline. But can the December quarter earnings test this optimism? Harshita Singh's report finds out.
IT stocks have had a euphoric rally over the last few months as bets of interest rate cuts in the US gain strength. The focus now shifts to the sector's December quarter earnings, which begins with the results of Infosys and TCS on January 11. Notwithstanding the cheer at the bourses, the December quarter is expected to have remained weak, in line with previous quarters. Slower deal conversions and continued weakness in discretionary spending by clients is likely to have kept the revenue momentum muted, as per experts.
We expect muted revenue growth for Tier 1 IT services companies and mixed trends for Tier 2 companies in a seasonally soft quarter due to weak macros, job losses, higher deal scrutiny, and decision-making delays. We expect that the moderation in deal win TCV after a high base in Q2 FY24. However, the ramp up in earlier won large cost takeout deals from Q2 is expected to aid recovery for H2 and set the tone for FY25.
Those at Kotak Institutional Equities note that deal wins have been disappointing in quarter 3. There was a surprising dip in wins from North America compared to earlier quarters. Moreover, no mega deals were announced compared to 6 wins in quarter 2, which is a point of concern. Higher furlough-led seasonality is also adding to weakness in the reporting quarter. Wage hikes by Infosys, Wipro, and HCL Tech will further weigh on their respective margins, analysts say. As per 4 estimates, Infosys and Wipro are expected to report quarterly revenue decline of 1 to 2.7% in constant currency terms. TCS may report flattish growth. HCL Tech, meanwhile, is expected to be an outlier with likely sequential growth of 4 to 6% on seasonal demand for its product business. The weak macro environment will likely keep both December and March quarters weak. A turnaround, analysts say, can be seen only from quarter 1 of FY25, which depends on the pace of global rate cuts.
The valuation to a certain extent are stretched, but we like certain pockets where we believe that, there might be some earnings improvement. So considering Infosys, which has a high discretionary exposure, so if the macro improves, their earnings will improve, so will be there. Q3 and Q4 are anyway weak. Q1 and Q2 are good quarters for IT companies. So it all depends upon how fast the macro improves. So if it improves really quickly, then Q1 onwards, one should see positive momentum.
As regards things to watch out, guidance for March quarter and commentary on revenue leakage from discretionary spending cuts will decide if Street's optimism for a quick recovery in 2024 would materialize or not. Today, on January 9, stock-specific action and global cues will guide Dalal Street's trends.
He's making plans for an early retirement. Business Standard.
Many experts believe that IT stocks would see increased volatility in the weeks to come. Moving on, another disturbing trend has emerged in the evolving landscape of cybercrimes. It is being called cyber kidnapping. Abhijit Kumar has more on it in our explainer segment.
A 17-year-old Chinese exchange student in the US recently went missing in what local police are calling a case of cyber kidnapping. He was later found in a tent in the Utah wilderness, where he isolated himself after repeated threats from scammers telling him if he didn't comply, his family would be harmed in China. It's a new crime trend in which scammers extort victims remotely, convincing their families they have been kidnapped. Cyber kidnapping involves deceiving family members of a victim into believing that their loved one is held hostage and is in grave danger. The scammers use technology to coerce the victim into isolation and capture images that falsely depict his or her confinement. You must be wondering how criminals coerce individuals into isolation. Target victims first have their digital data breached. This follows repeated threats that coerce the victims into isolation for the protection of their personal files. Subsequently, victims are manipulated into sharing their photos and videos in isolation, which are then used for extortion. Family members often panic upon receiving these materials and succumb to ransom demands. Unlike traditional abductions, virtual kidnappers do not kidnap anyone. Instead, they use deceptions and threats to coerce victims to pay a quick ransom, points out US Federal Bureau of Investigation. They say cyber kidnappers contact both the victims and their families, telling each that the other is in danger. Ransomware, however, remains a prevalent cyber threat where the victim's data, files, or systems are locked out, rendering them inaccessible until a ransom is paid to the attacker. But the proliferation of artificial intelligence has expanded the opportunities for scammers. AI is now being used to replicate the voice or appearance of an individual to deceive his or her family into paying the ransom. To protect oneself from cyber kidnapping, the FBI proposes the best course of action is to hang up the phone. Even if one engages a caller, don't call out the victim or loved one's name. One should ask questions that only the alleged kidnapped victim would know, such as the name of a pet. Avoid sharing information about yourself or your family. As cyber threats continue to evolve, staying aware of the menace of cyber kidnapping is important for young individuals and organizations alike. Cyber experts suggest that a robust back-end security infrastructure can prevent such attacks in the first place.
I'm backed by the nation's trusted bank, SBI, the banker to every Indian.
Cyber experts suggest that keeping all software up to date and adding multi-factor authentication as a layer of security can help thwart such attacks. Well, that's all for today. For more news and analysis, please log into our website, business-standard.com. Thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.